Hello, it's Tom, and today we have a video for this plant, which is the hyacinth, only grown in our homes temporarily for a couple of weeks or maybe a month each year. And the reason why is because it smells so good. So the hyacinth, yes, absolutely. It's grown primarily because it smells absolutely amazing, okay? It obviously looks pretty as well. It's really attractive. It looks great, and it's cheap. They're so cheap to buy. The bulbs usually come in perhaps three in a pot. Sometimes you get them singly. They're just not expensive and they're easy to pick up and they're so easy to grow. There are a couple of key things that you must not do and some things that are really variable, which I will cover in this video so you know what's what. When hyacinths are grown normally, they're grown outdoors. They are outdoor plants. You put them in the ground and they will flower in spring, pretty much reliably year after year after year. Now, what happens is because they're just a kind of a popular house plant that people like to have, and every single year you'll find them in stores, usually around November time onwards, up until well spring really. And these bulbs have been forced, so they've been encouraged to bloom out of season. If they were in the ground, they would not be like this at all. The care is different as well because you're inside a home. If you think about what I've just said, if they're grown in spring, it tends to be not that warm. Our homes are quite a warm location. So that is the primary driver of problems and how things look and the appearance of these plants is the temperature. I'll get onto this a bit more as we go through the video, but I just want to caveat that to start with, that temperature is the most important thing with hyacinths being grown indoors. So let's get started. Let's look at some care then. So we start with light first of all. So once they sprouted, they're on their way. You don't need to be too concerned about light. You could grow them in a slightly lower light location, or you could grow them in full sun. Either any sort of on that scale is absolutely fine. I will say though, in full sun, it's going to increase the temperature. Okay, it's going to be quite warm. Probably behind the window, it's going to be warm. The plants will grow a lot faster. The leaves are going to come up much quicker, and so will the flowering stems as well. They're going to come up fast if it's really bright because it's warmer. If you're growing it in a slightly lower light location, it's possibly quite likely to be a little cooler, which is going to mean that they're going to grow a bit slowly. In terms of watering, it's going to again depend on where you've chosen it. The bright location with lots of light is going to need more water than a plant which is growing in a lower light location. You probably realistically looking to water maybe 2 or 3 times a week. That might seem a bit excessive and it will depend on your circumstances, but also because of how they're grown, they are crammed into a tiny container. I will show you what one looks like with some roots. You can see how much is taken up this space. Temporarily, this is absolutely fine. It's not going to be a problem. What I'm trying to get across here is there isn't a huge amount of potter mix that is available to hold water because it's just full of root, basically. So they are going to be thirsty plants and you are going to need to water them relatively frequently. Let's now move on to the issue of temperature, which, as I said earlier, is the most important thing when you're growing these plants. They are grown in spring. That's when they normally bloom and they're outdoors and it's cooler. If you look at them, they're not really raising much off the ground when they're outdoors. They just don't. The flowering stem is quite sturdy. It doesn't come up like this. This is quite a long flowering stem that most people won't see outside naturally. It's because it's so warm in here. Okay, it's warmer in my home than it probably would be for the most of spring in this, especially in the UK in this country. It's warm in my home, and I like it warm, and that's what I want. I don't want to be in a cold house, but by doing that, it's triggering them to grow excessively and too much. It's not natural for them to be growing this tall. You still get the same amount of flowers, they still smell good, but the length of things are much longer than they would be normally. The leaves are a lot longer, the flowering spike goes much higher. And because of that, it can look a bit lopsided. As I've said, I have been growing them for many years, and I have a photo which I took probably about 10 years ago. Okay, this is how long I've been documenting things about these plants. And side by side, it's not the best resolution because it's such an old photo. But let me off, don't be too harsh on me. Okay, so in this example, what I've done is there's three types of growth now. So you've got this one and you've got the ones in the photo. So the one which is really stout and not very tall has been grown in a cold kitchen. So it closer resembles what it would be like if it was grown outdoors. The one on the far end is because it was grown in a very, very, very warm living room, which had a fire in it. So the temperature in there was very, very high. And this one here is more of an average winter temperature, which is warm. So as you can see, there's a massive difference what happens to the plants, depending on how warm it is. There's also another factor as well. How warm it is depends on how long they will essentially last for and how long you'll get a nice smell. Cool temperatures are going to be prolonged. You're going to have them for a lot longer, possibly an extra week if the temperatures are cooler. If the temperatures are really hot, they're not going to last long at all. You're talking maybe less than a week of beautiful scent before it starts to go over. And you know when a hyacinth's starting to go over, the smell, it just doesn't smell as fresh. There's still a little bit of it that's familiar, but it's not quite as pleasant. Some people absolutely hate it, but it kind of stales a little bit. It's not quite as nice. And so temperature can really affect so much how the plant looks, which I think this is borderline ugly at this point because it's starting to look lopsided. And then you can obviously get it looking ridiculous. Yeah. So you really do ideally want to choose a cool spot in your home for the best effects is what I would suggest. If, like me though, you just don't have a cool spot and you have no choice but to grow them like this, then what you can do is you can tie them, okay? Use a little bit of string and just keep them together. It's fine. And then you'll keep some of the appearance. So that's probably what I would suggest to do there. Looking at humidity is not really an issue with these plants at all. In fact, not really an issue. It won't be a problem. I have grown these in so many different conditions. I've probably been growing hyacinths for maybe 15, 20 years, and I love them. Every winter, I pick up at least one, usually more than that. But I just think they're so wonderful, and they just smell so good. The smell is so good, and it just fills your home, and they're just fantastic. I can tell you, humidity is not a problem. Brown tips, brown ends, it just doesn't happen. Now, I'm not saying it would never, ever happen, but for most growers, you're not going to have humidity issues. You don't really need to feed these houseplants. It's not going to make a huge difference. Like I said, once it's starting to go, it's almost too late. So feeding them isn't going to make any real massive difference to how the flowers look or what happens to them. Now, if you're planning to keep hold of them, then yes, you will need to look to feed them afterwards. People who've got hay fever might not like these plants. In fact, if you've got hay fever, you probably really know that you do not like these plants. It's extremely potent, okay? The smell is extremely strong and there's probably pollen floating around as well. They can cause allergies. And I just love them. They're just so great. They look colourful, fantastic bit of colour in cold months of the year when nothing else is growing outdoors. They just smell fantastic. But from doing that, I am aware that some people do not like them and they suffer. So yeah, if you're an allergy sufferer or you live with someone who suffers allergies, these may not be the best plants to have around. Okay, and in terms of safety, so I see a lot of people saying that they're poisonous, but actually they're not terrible. Now, don't get me wrong, obviously you don't want to be eating these plants, and that's the primary problem you're going to come across if you eat them. I've seen some people saying you shouldn't touch them with bare hands. This is just, I think, excessive. It's good to be safe, and if you are a nervous person or you've had allergies or problems before, absolutely do it. But you can touch the bulbs. There is no, you're not going to come into contact with stuff. They're actually slightly related to onions, okay, and they contain oxalic acid. Onions contain that as well, and you eat those. Now, don't get me wrong, you should not be eating these. They do contain a higher concentration, so in that sense, they can cause you more problems. So don't eat them. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is they are generally straightforward houseplants, but you have to watch out for pets or children perhaps eating them, and of course the smell if you're an allergy sufferer. So I think that's it for this video and the care for these plants. Beautiful hyacinth. I love it, honestly. There is more to talk about in terms of what do you do after the blooms have finished. But because this video is already no doubt getting on for a long period of time, I'm going to stop and I'm going to do a separate video to talk about that because there are quite a few options you can pick from. So for now, that's how to look after them. Okay, so I hope it's been useful. I hope it's been helpful. If you have any questions about the care, then do drop a comment in the comments below and I will do my best to answer it. And I will do another video in the future which discusses what to do afterwards and maybe some more problems. So catch you in the next one. And thank you for watching this video.